What's that story you've never been able to tell? Please consider subscribing if you enjoy the video. I found out when I was 28 that my dad's side of the family had been in the witness protection program my entire life, and that their names were not what I had been told. Back when I was in high school, I wanted to approach this girl on a bus on my way to school. She was really hot and I knew I'd regret it if I didn't approach her. There was one big problem. There was a middle-aged lady seated next to her and I couldn't talk to this girl with the lady right next to her. I had to think of a quick way to get rid of the lady. I then woke up from my seat, slowly walked to the row they were seated and calmly asked the lady, "Excuse me ma'am, could you please let me sit next to my sister?" Turns out the lady was the girl's mum. I moved to the UK from Zimbabwe when I was 4. The first few years my parents spent their whole time trying to settle down. By the time I was 8 they realized we had never been to London. So on a hot June day we went into London. We went to the aquarium, Covent Garden to see all the performers, on the London Eye. It was a good day. To end the day we went to Buckingham Palace. I was tired so I was resting my head against the bars asking all the questions you'd expect from an 8-year-old. After a while my parents said it was time to go. I pushed away from the bars and then felt the cold steel against the back of my ears. I hadn't noticed my head has slipped through. I panicked. A crowd gathered. I'm probably in many a family photo album. Even Horse Guard came to see what the commission was about. Bet he wasn't expecting a child with his head stuck. By then I had accepted this as my new home, but I couldn't figure out how I'd go to sleep with a spike on the floor. Luckily an old lady had a tub of Vaseline in her handbag and my dad was able to pull me out with my head smothered in Vaseline. I had a chat with one of the most notorious pedophiles in my country. It was odd. He spoke in a way that made it seem like he was my age. I was 7. He eventually tried to trick me into touching his dong by buying me a hot dog and a soda. I only declined and bailed, because I was low-key offended that he put mustard on the hot dog he was offering me. The time my mom needed to go back into the house to get a scarf. Because of this we were held back and missed a bus by 10 seconds. That bus then crashed into a bridge at very high speed, because the bus driver had mental health problems. It is the closest I have ever been to death. I will never complain about my mom going back to get a scarf in my life again. When I was about 14 I found a slingshot in the woods. It was a pretty good slingshot that must have cost a fair bit, as it had a metal frame and a thick rubber sling. One day my friend and I were on top of a hill out in the countryside and a jogger came running out of the nearby tree line. He was some distance away and below us. Without putting a lot of thought into it I shot a stone just above his head. The rock went exactly where I wanted it to, but if there was wind, or my aim was off, or 1,000 other factors, I would have seriously fricked the jogger up. I muse on that at least once a week. I never see my friend and we haven't spoken about it since it happened. In 6th grade one night I was like, I really don't feel like going to school tomorrow. So I looked up how to get a fever. I found a tutorial that said to take a bath at the hottest temperature your bathtub will go, and then stay up all night. I decided to try it and I started the water for a steaming hot bath. It stung to get in it, and I somehow survived it for 30 minutes. When I was getting out I felt dizzy and then I fell on the floor and had a seizure. I woke up and saw the blinding ceiling lights of the bathroom and the first thing I thought was, am I dead? And then I threw up in the toilet next to me and had a migraine for the night. And later found out I got 1st-degree burns. So long story short, don't do that. When I was just a boy, I was touched when I was getting my hair cut. My father had to make a quick run to the ATM. So we were alone. I never realized it affected me that much and honestly didn't even think about it for years until I drove by the place where the barber shop used to be and just felt immense stress. I would never tell my father. He has always been insecure about whether or not he's been a good father to me. This would make him hate himself. In 6th grade, we had this paper we had to write. I forget what the subject was. I decided to procrastinate a lot. Then the day it was due rolled around, and I had nothing. We had to read our papers out loud in front of the class. I was totally prepared to take the 0. But then I realized he wasn't actually taking the papers we used. So I decided to go up to the front of the class with a blank sheet of paper and improvise. I ended up getting an 80. Around 42 years ago, my little brother was playing with matches and set the woods on fire. Burned about 10 acres. Everyone assumed that it was me smoking in the woods so he and I just let it be me. I took the blame. And the ass whooping, because Dad was kinda rough on the ass whoopings when he was mad, and I didn't want my little brother to have to take it. Being that Dad got a little carried away this time, broke my arm. We've just never told anyone the truth. My aunt was forced to hand her kids over to her alcoholic ex for a weekend visitation, but she was terrified he'd hurt them, so she sent me with them. I was 7 or maybe 8. They were 2 and 4. I thought myself so much older and decided it was the responsible thing to do, so I went. While at his apartment, he got wasted and called my aunt and told her he was going to throw them off his very high balcony. They were asleep. I didn't sleep at all that night. I sat up all night, no small featuring at that age, to make sure he didn't kill my baby cousins. Nobody knows. I think about it daily and wonder if it's why I have panic disorder. I wish there were better ways to protect kids in separations. When I was 17, I worked at a grocery store with a guy named Brian. Normal guy, mid-20s, lil chub. Didn't really think much of him. One day he tells me about how he lives in an apartment by himself and that his neighbors are absolutely crazy. Like they would yell at him to be quiet, pound against the wall to get him to shut up. Even though he wouldn't be doing anything, he would sneeze, and his neighbors would scream at the top of their lungs from next door. It was that bad. To be honest, I didn't really care much when he was telling me this. I just wanted to go home and not work anymore. Couple days go by and I noticed that Brian wasn't showing up anymore. Whatever, didn't think much of that either. A month or 2 goes by and he finally shows back up to work. So, being the nice friend I am, I asked him where he's been. He tells me he was actually fired, because he was in the hospital. I didn't think that was a valid reason to fire someone, but what do I know? I didn't comment on that. I asked him why he was in the hospital and he told me it was for personal reasons. I tell him it was good having him back, and carried on with my day. Fast forward a couple days to me talking to another coworker who was good friends with Brian. He says, "Did you hear what happened to Brian? Yeah, he was in the hospital and was fired or something. Do you know why though?" "No." He said it was personal. So this is what happened a couple months ago before Brian disappeared. He was at home by himself, when his neighbors, surprise, start yelling at him through the walls for being too loud. Brian, telling himself I've had enough, decides to call the police and have them deal with it. The police arrived and started talking to the neighbors for quite some time. Hours go by with the police and neighbors. So he calls the police again to ask what's taking so long. The police respond with, "We left like an hour and a half ago." Turns out that the neighbors were never yelling at him. In fact, they were never there. Brian was schizophrenic and was hearing voices in his head. He had to go to a mental hospital for a month. When I was 17, I was raped by the boy who lived up the street. When I finally got myself home, I went to my dad and he yelled at me for not being home earlier. My phone got taken away and I was sent to my room. I couldn't even shower. I could never bring myself to tell him after that. I still never talk about it with anyone. I've told this on Reddit before, but never in person. So I was at a water park with a girl I had a huge crush on and some of our mutual friends. I'm not a big fan of rides. She had been trying to talk me into going on one all day, and I finally agreed to try out this one really intense looking slide. Basically you go down the slide while sitting on this big inflatable thing. And it was for 2 people, so naturally I got paired up with the girl I had a crush on. We both climbed into the inflatable, which had these little handles on it for you to hold onto when you went down. When we went down the slide, it was way faster than I thought it would be. I accidentally let go of one of the handles, tried to grab it again, and ended up grabbing her hand instead by accident. I was really embarrassed, but she put her other hand on top of mine until we reached the bottom. I guess she thought I was scared, which is also kinda embarrassing, but it was a nice moment. She later went on to be my first kiss about 6 months later, and we're still close friends today. I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Western Samoa. One weekend several of my fellow volunteers and I went camping on this tiny private island. On the first or second night, we made a bonfire and all got super drunk, then went skinny dipping. The water was only about chest deep, warm and still. There was no light pollution, so the stars were blazingly bright. We also inadvertently kicked up some bioluminescence, filling the water with stars. Tipsily floating naked in the warm sea, completely surrounded on all sides by stars, and close friends is one of my most beautiful and euphoric memories. I started doing one of those 5K running apps. On this app, the trainer is named Erin. She coaches you through each training session. I've never been a runner and now can do a solid 5k. But anyway, Erin told me that I've got to have a mantra, something I can repeat to myself when I want to give up. Her mantra is "You're strong, Erin. Be strong." I could never come up with anything better, so now my mantra is "You're strong, Erin. Be strong." My name isn't even close to Erin, but it doesn't feel right using my own name at this point. I'm surprised how often I want to give up on things and automatically think "You're strong, Erin. Be strong." It is not mind-blowing or anything of the sort, which is why I never told it. But when I first started getting sick and couldn't move around the house like usual, my cat would yell at me for 2 minutes until I sat down. He would proceed to purr furiously over my stomach, which was hurting, for about 10 minutes at a time. He would chirp at me if I tried to get up before and keep bumping my leg as I walked past if I never sat down. Little did I know that he was trying to heal my cancer. That was growing into the muscle by that point. He's a little Siamese mix and he is very vocal, and I appreciate his little squeaks of support. He is a very good boy. Thanks for watching and subscribe for more r/AskReddit content. Be sure to check out our playlist, link in the description below.